On a peaceful weekday afternoon, a man is out driving his new car, feeling content as he enjoys the quiet drive. This is his moment of relaxation, a rare break from his demanding job. He's a professional in his 30s, well-dressed, and with a calm presence. He has worked hard to reach this point, where he can treat himself to small luxuries like this car. The streets are nearly empty, with only a few other cars passing by, and the breeze flows through his window as he takes in the scenery. But soon, he senses something unusual. He notices a car following him from a distance. At first, he brushes it off, but as he glances in his rearview mirror again, he realizes it's a police cruiser. The flashing lights come on, and he feels a twist in his stomach. He has done nothing wrong and hasn't broken any traffic laws, so he's puzzled about why he's being pulled over. His thoughts start racing, but he keeps calm. He knows that staying level-headed is the best approach in these situations. Slowing down, he pulls over to the side of the road, waiting for the officer to approach. He takes a deep breath and mentally prepares himself. He's had moments like this before, and he's learned that the best way to handle them is with patience and respect. He makes sure his hands are visible on the steering wheel, aware that anything else could be misinterpreted. The officer steps out of the cruiser, walking toward the man's car with a stern look on his face. The officer's hand rests firmly on his holster, an intimidating gesture that doesn't go unnoticed. The man senses the tension even before a word is spoken. When the officer reaches the window, he taps on it with a level of force that feels excessive. Rolling the window down, the man greets the officer politely, trying to ease the mood. But the officer doesn't respond kindly. Instead, he gives the man a hard look and demands to know what he's doing in this neighborhood. The question feels intrusive, almost accusatory, as if the officer has already decided the man doesn't belong here. The man keeps his tone steady, explaining that he's simply out for a drive. He offers to show his identification and registration, hoping to clear up any confusion. But the officer doesn't seem interested in hearing his explanation. The officer suddenly claims that the car is stolen. The accusation is startling, but the man keeps his composure, repeating that the car is his and that he has the documents to prove it. He can't understand why this officer won't even look at his paperwork. It's as if the officer has already made up his mind, determined to treat him as a suspect. The man wonders what more he can say to defuse the situation. Instead of calming down, the officer becomes more aggressive, firing off questions that feel less like inquiries and more like accusations. Each question seems designed to trap the man, to make him slip up somehow. Passers-by start to notice the encounter, with a few slowing down to watch from a distance. The man feels their eyes on him, adding to the pressure. He remains respectful, choosing his words carefully, hoping the situation won't escalate. But with each second that passes, it becomes clear that the officer isn't interested in finding the truth, only in asserting his power over a man he assumes is guilty. The officer stands by the man's car, continuing to question him in a tone that is anything but friendly. The man, still calm, answers each question politely, even though it's clear that the officer isn't truly listening. The questions feel like they're meant to provoke rather than understand. The officer seems set on finding something wrong with the man, as if he's already guilty of something. Trying to stay collected, the man repeats that he owns the car and offers his license and registration again, but the officer waves him off, not even glancing at the paperwork. The officer suddenly demands that the man step out of the car. The man is taken aback, but complies without hesitation, knowing that refusing might only make things worse. He opens the door slowly and steps onto the pavement, standing tall but keeping his posture non-threatening. Around them, a few people have gathered at a distance, watching the scene unfold with curiosity and concern. The officer seems almost pleased by the attention, acting as though he's in control of an important situation. The man, however, knows there's nothing criminal about his actions, and he's determined to remain respectful, even though he can feel the officer's treatment is unfair. The officer begins to ask more personal questions, prying into the man's life in ways that feel uncomfortable and unnecessary. The man answers politely, feeling he has little choice, even though he's starting to wonder where this is all going. The questions are leading, as if the officer is trying to paint a picture that just isn't true. The man can tell that nothing he says will change the officer's attitude. The tension grows with every word, and he feels trapped in this situation, where nothing he does or says seems to make a difference. Then, without warning, the officer accuses the man of acting suspiciously. The man is stunned but keeps his reaction controlled, knowing any sign of frustration could be misread. He explains, calmly and clearly, that he was only driving through the area. But the officer's expression remains hard, as though he's not interested in the truth. Instead, the officer starts patting him down, searching him as if he expects to find something incriminating. The man lets him proceed, hoping that compliance will prove he has nothing to hide. The crowd of onlookers grows, and some people start whispering, curious about what's happening. The man can feel the weight of their stares, but he stays focused, refusing to let the officer's accusations get under his skin. The officer, on the other hand, continues his search, treating the man as though he's already guilty of something. His tone is harsh, his gestures rough, and it's clear he's unwilling to consider that he might be wrong. The man, meanwhile, remains silent, knowing that anything he says could be twisted. He wants to defend himself, to tell the officer he's making a mistake, but he can see that words won't change the officer's mind. Despite the frustration bubbling up inside him, he keeps calm, understanding that staying composed is the only way to handle this. He hopes that maybe, at some point, the officer will realize the mistake he's making. But as the minutes drag on, it becomes clear that this isn't going to be a simple encounter. As the minutes pass, the officer's attitude only becomes harsher. The man stands there, trying to stay patient, but it's clear that the officer isn't interested in resolving this calmly. The officer demands that the man place his hands on the hood of the car, and the man, though surprised, complies without hesitation. He knows that resisting or questioning the officer's orders could make things worse, so he remains steady, focused on not letting this situation escalate. The officer's tone shifts as he accuses the man of being resistant. This accusation seems completely out of place, and the man feels a wave of frustration rising within him. He has been nothing but respectful, following each order without complaint, yet the officer treats him as though he's a threat. The man considers speaking up, explaining again that he's doing exactly as instructed, but he decides to hold his tongue. He understands that anything he says might be misinterpreted, and he doesn't want to risk giving the officer any more reason to doubt him. Onlookers are beginning to pay even more attention, some visibly disturbed by the officer's aggressive behavior. The man notices a few of them holding up their phones, likely recording the incident. He hopes this documentation might help him later if things go further. For now, though, he remains silent, his mind focused on staying as calm as possible. He keeps his gaze steady, refusing to show any sign of fear or frustration. The officer, meanwhile, begins to search the man's car. He rifles through the seats, the glove compartment, even the trunk, looking for anything that might justify his actions. The man watches as the officer digs deeper, feeling a mixture of frustration and helplessness. He knows there's nothing in the car that could be seen as illegal, yet he's forced to stand by as the officer treats his personal belongings with no regard. Despite the urge to protest, he keeps his composure, knowing that this is the safest path for now. While the search continues, a quiet tension hangs in the air. The onlookers remain nearby, some whispering to each other, trying to make sense of what's happening. A few people seem visibly uncomfortable, sensing that something isn't right. The man notices this but keeps his eyes forward, focusing on staying grounded. He doesn't want to give the officer any reason to accuse him further, so he stays in place, his hands resting on the hood as instructed. Then, after what feels like an eternity, the officer finishes searching the car. Instead of finding anything suspicious, all he has turned up are the man's personal belongings and a few everyday items. The officer looks frustrated, almost as if he expected to find something that would confirm his suspicions. The man sees the flicker of disappointment in the officer's eyes, but he remains silent, waiting for the next instruction. Finally, the officer turns back to the man, looking him up and down with a hard stare. The man can tell that the officer is still determined to find something wrong, still unwilling to let him go. Despite the man's cooperation, the officer's attitude hasn't softened, and he doesn't seem interested in backing down. The man takes a steady breath, bracing himself for whatever comes next, all the while hoping that somehow this encounter will come to a peaceful end. But from the officer's expression, it's clear that he isn't finished yet. The officer stares at the man, his expression hard and unyielding. Despite finding nothing suspicious in the car, he seems unwilling to let go of the idea that this man has done something wrong. Without any explanation, he suddenly grabs the man's arm and begins pulling him towards the patrol car, claiming he's being detained for resisting. The man feels a rush of disbelief. He had done everything asked of him, cooperated fully, and remained calm throughout the entire encounter. Yet here he is, being handled roughly and accused of resisting. Feeling trapped, he tries to reason with the officer, calmly saying he's cooperating and has been respectful from the beginning. But the officer doesn't seem to hear him. It's as if his mind is made up. He tightens his grip on the man's arm, ignoring the calm words and focusing only on his own authority. The man feels the frustration building but keeps his emotions in check, knowing that showing anger could only make things worse. He's aware that everything he does will be watched closely, and he doesn't want to give the officer any reason to escalate the situation further. A few bystanders, seeing the officer's rough treatment, look visibly uncomfortable. Some whisper to each other, and others hold up their phones, capturing every moment. The man notices the phones, and though it doesn't solve his immediate problem, he feels a slight sense of relief knowing there will be a record of what's happening. The officer, however, seems unfazed by the crowd and keeps his focus entirely on the man, determined to stay in control of the situation. Then, without permission, the officer starts searching through the man's pockets, as if expecting to find something incriminating. He moves roughly, showing no regard for the man's personal space. The man lets him search without resisting, knowing any reaction could lead to more accusations. In one of the pockets, the officer finds a small key, and he immediately holds it up as if it's some kind of evidence. The man explains that it's simply a spare key to his car, but the officer hardly listens, his mind focused on creating a narrative that isn't true. After finishing the search, the officer moves back to the car, pulling open the glove compartment and searching through it even more thoroughly. This time, he finds something that makes him stop, a small, hidden compartment. With a spark of eagerness, he opens it, clearly expecting to uncover something that could justify his actions. But inside, there's no contraband, no suspicious items, only an ID badge. The officer holds it up, squinting at the badge, and slowly realizes what he's looking at. The badge is issued by the FBI. For the first time, the officer's confident expression fades as he processes this new information. He glances over at the man, finally realizing the mistake he may have made. There's a pause, a flicker of hesitation in the officer's movements, as if he's trying to piece together what this means. The man, seeing the officer's reaction, senses that he's just realized the gravity of his actions. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging his mistake, the officer quickly pockets the badge, almost as if he's hoping to avoid facing the consequences. The man notices, though, and realizes that the officer now understands who he's dealing with. The tables are slowly turning, and while the officer seems unsure of what to do next, the man remains calm, knowing that the truth is now on his side. The power dynamic has shifted, and for the first time, the officer's arrogance begins to waver. The officer stands there, gripping the FBI badge he found in the hidden compartment. His confident demeanor has vanished, replaced by a look of surprise and confusion. He stares at the badge as if trying to make sense of it, and for a moment, He seems frozen, not sure how to proceed. The man remains calm, watching the officer's reaction, knowing that the truth has finally come to light. He has nothing to hide, and now the officer is the one who looks unsure. For a moment, there's silence. The officer glances back at the man, who meets his gaze steadily, without fear or anger, just calm, controlled assurance. The officer realizes that his assumptions and accusations have all led him to this moment, where he's made a mistake he can't ignore. The badge in his hand proves that the man he thought he could bully is actually an FBI agent, someone trained in law enforcement and fully aware of his rights. The officer clears his throat, clearly unsettled. He quickly tries to regain his authority, hoping to brush this aside. With a forced sternness, he says, "Why didn't you tell me you're with the FBI?" As if shifting the blame to the man. But the man simply raises an eyebrow, calmly explaining that he tried multiple times to show his identification, but the officer never let him. He didn't hide anything. It was the officer's own refusal to listen that led them here. The crowd around them watches closely, sensing a change in the interaction. They see the officer's unease, the way he's suddenly cautious in his movements. The man's calm presence stands in sharp contrast to the officer's uncomfortable fidgeting. Holding the badge, the officer's confidence is now slipping away, and he realizes the gravity of his actions. He is no longer just dealing with a citizen he thought he could intimidate. He's dealing with a fellow law enforcement official, someone with the authority to report and document misconduct. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, the officer attempts to downplay the situation, saying, "We had to make sure everything was in order. Just doing my job." But his tone lacks conviction, and even the onlookers seem unconvinced. The man, still calm, responds by stating simply, "I respect law enforcement and the job you do. But everyone deserves respect in return. I followed all your instructions and complied fully, even when treated unfairly." His words are measured, but they cut through the officer's attempts to shift blame, leaving the officer without a response. Seeing that he has no real defense, the officer takes a deep breath, clearly feeling the weight of his actions. His tone softens slightly, and he stammers out a half-hearted apology, trying to cover his mistake without drawing more attention to it. But it's too late. The crowd, and more importantly, the man, have seen his true colors. The officer's attempt at authority has crumbled, leaving him exposed in front of everyone. The man doesn't press the issue or demand more from the officer. Instead, he simply says, "I think we're done here," signaling that he's ready to move on. He reaches out for his badge, and the officer hands it back, his fingers trembling slightly as he does. The man takes the badge and returns it to its place in his car, all the while maintaining his calm demeanor. As he turns to get back into his car, he leaves the officer standing there, facing the consequences of his actions in front of a silent, watchful crowd. As the man calmly returns to his car, the crowd of onlookers remains, still watching the scene unfold with curiosity and judgment. The officer stands there, looking almost stunned, as if he's still trying to process everything that's happened. The realization of his mistake is written all over his face. His confidence has vanished, replaced by a blend of embarrassment and regret. He knows that the people around him, phones in hand, have witnessed his actions, and there's no easy way to undo the damage. The man closes his car door and sits quietly for a moment, allowing himself to reflect on the situation. Although he could drive away now, part of him feels compelled to make sure this incident doesn't simply disappear without accountability. After all, it's not just about him. It's about everyone who might be treated unfairly in a similar situation. He wants the officer to understand the impact of his actions, not just brush them off as another routine traffic stop gone wrong. As he rolls down his window, he looks back at the officer, who is still rooted in place, looking uneasy. In a steady voice, the man addresses him, choosing his words carefully so they are clear but not confrontational. He tells the officer, "You know, people expect respect from those who serve the community. That's why they trust us, why they feel safe. His words carry weight, and he can see that the officer is listening closely. He wants to make sure that the officer understands that this moment isn't just about a mistaken identity, but about the respect that all individuals deserve. The officer nods slightly, clearly absorbing the message. His expression shifts from one of defensiveness to one of quiet reflection. For the first time, he seems genuinely aware of the impact of his actions, as if realizing that his behavior had consequences beyond this one encounter. There's an awkward pause as he tries to find the right words, and finally, he speaks, his voice softer now. I didn't handle this right. I assumed things I shouldn't have. His tone is sincere, showing a hint of vulnerability that hadn't been there before. The man acknowledges the officer's words with a slight nod, allowing a brief moment of understanding to settle between them. It's clear that the officer has learned something from this, but the man knows that one conversation may not be enough to change everything. Still, he hopes this interaction will stay with the officer, perhaps making him think twice in the future before letting assumptions guide his actions. The crowd, sensing the conversation winding down, begins to disperse. Some people still linger, exchanging quiet comments, while others put their phones away and move on. The man watches as they go, feeling a mixture of relief and hope that the officer's actions won't be easily forgotten. That maybe someone who witnessed this will feel empowered to stand up for themselves if they ever find themselves in a similar situation. After a moment, the officer steps back, giving the man space to leave. Thank you, he says quietly, almost as if he's speaking to himself. The man nods once more, acknowledging the effort, however small, that the officer has made to recognize his mistake. He doesn't respond with anger or frustration, but instead with a sense of resolve, knowing he handled the situation with dignity and composure. As the man starts his car and prepares to drive away, he glances back in the rearview mirror. He sees the officer standing there, looking thoughtful and humbled, as if the weight of his actions is finally sinking in. The man feels a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that he stood his ground without compromising his own values. As he pulls back onto the road, he hopes that this encounter will leave a lasting impact on the officer, perhaps inspiring him to approach his duties with more empathy and respect in the future. As the man drives away from the scene, he can't shake the thoughts running through his mind. The entire situation has left him with mixed emotions. He feels relieved to be free from the tense encounter, but there's still a lingering frustration. He did everything right, stayed calm, complied with every request, yet he was still treated with suspicion and disrespect. He wonders how many others face similar situations every day without any way to defend themselves, without an official badge to protect them. While he's thankful for his position, the man realizes that being an FBI agent shouldn't have been the only reason for the officer to finally step back. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their status or title. His heart feels heavy, thinking about those who may not be as lucky, who might not have proof of authority to fall back on. The idea that someone else might go through the same experience, or worse, pushes him to consider how he can use his role to make a difference. Back at his office, the man reflects on what he could do with this experience. He decides that simply moving on and forgetting about it isn't enough. He knows this situation is part of a larger issue, one that affects more people than just him. Taking a deep breath, he realizes he has both the opportunity and the responsibility to address this problem within his organization. If he doesn't, then moments like this will continue to happen, and people will continue to feel targeted, mistreated, and misunderstood. He schedules a meeting with his supervisor and shares the full story, detailing every aspect of the incident. His supervisor listens carefully, nodding with understanding as the man explains the emotional weight of the experience. The supervisor expresses empathy, recognizing the seriousness of the issue, and encourages him to file a report. Together, they discussed how they might raise awareness about these types of encounters within law enforcement, focusing on empathy, respect, and the power of assumption. Encouraged by the support he's receiving, the man decides to take it a step further. He proposes starting a training program within their department, one that would focus specifically on fair treatment and unconscious bias. His hope is to create a system where officers are encouraged to approach each individual with a sense of respect and understanding, regardless of their background. He envisions a training that goes beyond the standard rules, something that addresses the human aspect of their work. As they finalize the plan, the man feels a renewed sense of purpose. He realizes that this experience, while uncomfortable and challenging, has given him a unique opportunity to make a meaningful impact. If he can help officers understand the importance of empathy and approach their roles with an open mind, then perhaps fewer people will have to endure the same treatment he did. His supervisor assures him that they'll work together to get the initiative off the ground, offering resources and support to ensure it reaches as many officers as possible. Leaving the meeting, the man feels a weight lift from his shoulders. He knows that the process won't be quick, that changing perspectives and attitudes within law enforcement will take time and patience. But he's determined to start somewhere, and this initiative feels like a strong step in the right direction. As he walks back to his office, he feels hopeful, knowing that he's using his experience to create something positive, something that could help prevent similar incidents and build a foundation of trust between officers and the community they serve. The incident that initially left him frustrated now feels like a powerful motivation. Instead of focusing on the negativity of the moment, he's channeling that energy into action, using his voice to advocate for change. It's a small start, but it's meaningful, and he hopes that over time, this effort will ripple outward, affecting more officers and, ultimately, the communities they interact with. Weeks pass, and the man's initiative begins to take shape. He works closely with his supervisor to design a comprehensive training program aimed at addressing issues of bias and respect within law enforcement. It's not just about teaching officers the technicalities of their job. It's about helping them understand the impact of their actions on the people they encounter daily. The man knows that change won't happen overnight, but he's determined to make a lasting difference. As they roll out the first sessions of the training, the man is nervous but excited. He knows that this is a critical opportunity to influence how officers approach their work. The training focuses on empathy, emphasizing the importance of seeing the humanity in everyone they encounter. Officers are encouraged to think about how their words and actions affect others, especially those who may already feel vulnerable or misunderstood. During the first few training sessions, the man shares his personal experience. He talks about the encounter with the officer, explaining how it felt to be treated unfairly and how important it was for the officer to understand the impact of his actions. He encourages the officers in the room to reflect on their own experiences and biases, hoping to create a space where open, honest conversations can take place. The room is filled with a mix of reactions. Some officers nod along, others seem unsure, but everyone listens. It's clear that the conversation is making an impact. As the weeks go by, the feedback from the officers attending the training becomes more positive. Many begin to open up about their own challenges, their assumptions, and the ways they've seen bias affect their interactions with the public. For the first time, some officers are beginning to recognize the subtle ways that their biases have influenced their decisions. The man can see that the training is making a difference, even if it's just in small ways at first. There's one officer in particular who stands out to him. She's been quiet during the sessions, but after a few weeks, she approaches him after class. She admits that at first, she didn't understand why they were focusing so much on feelings and personal experiences. But over time, she's come to realize how much her own biases have shaped her interactions with people. She thanks the man for the program, saying that it's made her more aware of her own actions and how they can impact others. Her words bring a sense of accomplishment to the man, knowing that even one officer can make a positive change in how they approach their job. The man doesn't stop there. He continues to work on improving the training, adding new components, and encouraging officers to share their own stories. He also makes sure to gather feedback from the community, hoping to bridge the gap between law enforcement and those they serve. He knows that trust is built over time, and this initiative is just one step toward fostering that trust. Months later, the man sees signs that the program is beginning to change the culture within his department. Officers are starting to approach their work with more sensitivity, taking a moment to consider the person behind the uniform. The interactions between officers and the public are slowly improving, and the man can feel the positive energy building within the department. Though there's still work to be done, the progress is evident. As he reflects on everything that has happened, from that tense encounter with the officer to now, seeing the positive change in his colleagues, the man feels a sense of fulfillment. He's proud of the work he's done, not because it's been easy, but because it's been meaningful. He knows that his experience, one that could have been another frustrating chapter in a system that needs reform, has turned into a force for good. And that, to him, makes it all worth it. Months after the training program has been launched, the man begins to see the fruits of his labor. The atmosphere within the department has started to shift. Officers are approaching their work with a renewed sense of purpose, understanding the deeper impact their actions can have on the communities they serve. The training sessions have sparked conversations, not just within the department, but with the people they interact with every day. There is a sense of unity beginning to form, as officers begin to feel more connected to the communities they protect, and the public starts to feel that they are being seen as individuals, not just suspects or cases. One day, the man receives an unexpected email from a local community leader. She expresses her gratitude for the changes she's noticed, both in the department and in her own interactions with officers. She mentions a recent community meeting where several officers attended and listened to concerns without dismissing them. They were engaging, not just enforcing rules, but actively working to understand the needs of the people they were serving. The community leader credits the training program for the shift in attitude. The man is touched by her words, and it reassures him that the work he's doing is making a difference. The feedback continues to pour in. Officers are telling him how the training has impacted their day-to-day interactions. One officer shares how she diffused a potentially tense situation with a young person simply by taking a moment to listen, something she might not have done before. Another officer says that his perspective on people he once might have judged harshly has changed. Now, he's more patient and open to understanding the context behind someone's actions. These stories fill a man with hope, showing him that his efforts are having a tangible impact on how officers approach their jobs and treat the people they encounter. As the training program grows, more departments start to take notice. Other officers from nearby districts reach out, asking for guidance on how to implement similar programs in their own areas. The man feels proud, knowing that the impact of this initiative is expanding beyond his own department. It's not just about changing the culture within one police force, but about creating a ripple effect that can inspire change throughout the system. Despite the positive changes, the man remains grounded. He knows that change takes time and that there are still challenges ahead. Not every officer is on board with the new approach, and not every community is ready to embrace the change. But the man has learned that progress doesn't happen in a straight line. It's about the small victories, the moments where an officer chooses empathy over assumption, or when a community feels heard and valued. These are the building blocks of lasting change. He continues to refine the program, listening to feedback from both officers and the community, and making adjustments where needed. He understands that, just like the people they serve, officers are also human, with their own struggles and biases. The training is not about blaming or shaming. It's about growth, understanding, and learning together. It's about making sure that everyone, officers and civilians alike, feels valued and respected in every interaction. As he looks back at the journey he's been on, from that tense encounter with the officer to now, he feels a deep sense of fulfillment. He's proud of what he's accomplished, but he knows there's more work to be done. His experience has shown him that change is possible, even in a system that often feels set in its ways. It's not always easy, and it's not always fast, but it's worth it. And with each step forward, He feels more confident that his efforts are helping to shape a better future for everyone involved. In the end, the man understands that real change isn't about one big moment or dramatic gesture. It's about the everyday actions, the conversations, and the willingness to challenge assumptions. It's about leading with compassion and showing others the same respect that we all deserve. And as he continues his work, he knows that his story, and the story of countless others, can inspire the kind of change that the world needs.